Hello everyone. My guest is from United States, director of Watchmaker, Eric Arbuzow. Firstly, welcome.
Thank you, Tarkan.
And
So Mbacke was an interesting one. He went to Montbard. Him and along with Mohamed Traore, both of them center backs that can play outside back as well. Traore is left-footed, Mbacke is right-footed. They signed with Los Angeles Football Club, LAFC, and MLS at 18 years old. Both of them to first-team contracts from a development standpoint.
so you're
And
managing all this, I guess.
so through the partners that I work with, yes, in identifying these players. So they go there into their first pro contract. They sign 3-year contracts to play at LAFC, and during the time while they're in LAFC, Mbacke did well. He was able to find himself playing in some first team games. He played a lot of games in second team, which ultimately led to a loan to VillaReal B in Spain. So he was playing in second league Spain for a year at VillaReal. Um, Upon the end of the loan, Villarreal and LAFC could not come to the correct agreement for the player to transfer full time into Villarreal, which at that point I found a hole to be able to potentially move the player into Barca B. So what we did was we extended the player's contract an additional year to protect LAFC, so that if the player went on loan and the Barca denies the loan, then the player's free. Part of the process in dealing with young players is also doing right by the clubs, right? Like you ultimately are taking the player and the club and you're saying, how do I get the
Exactly.
player and the club to be the same and make sure that it works for both parties? So we had the chance to do this with Mbacke, and he went on loan. We extended an additional year, and he did quite well. Around this time is when I actually had connected with your team at Comparisоnator, and um, when we looked at those options to go there, what we found was something interesting, and I'll share my screen with you so I can let you see it.
Please.
This is actually the information that we pulled when we pushed him into, the target of saying we should probably consider looking at Barca. At the time, through virtual transfer, Mbacke would have been rated the number one center back or number one player in his position in Barca B in the entire league based on the metric points that existed. Now, the interesting part was after speaking to the scouting department and the people in Barcelona, obviously they knew the player. They knew that he would be, a good player to target. Um, but when you look at the metrics, at a much deeper level, I think up until his injury last year, I don't think there was any discrepancy that he was the best right center back in the league. I think this was something that most people see. We've had a substantial amount of interest across Europe for this player since. But he did go on to complete a permanent transfer to Barcelona. He's obviously still in the club now, and there's, again, still a large growing interest for this player. But what I found to be funny was the projection of being able to assume this might be one of the best players in the league, and through all of the metrics that are in Comparisonator, it actually dubbed
He's
him at the
also
top.
defensively number one, and in the AI score in general performance, he's also number one. So it's quite a
Correct.
talented player.
Yes, considering at the time that this went through, he was only, during this season, he started this season, he was 20 years old, right? So it's a very good level when you look at, the Primera division in Spain for a player of his age to be able to go into that market. I mean, his peak transfer market value surpassed, about 2.8 million. Um, and currently it's only about 500,000, but I think everybody who's seen this player play completely understands, where he is. I mean, you're looking at a metric of a player that's value is substantially lower than his teammate in Marcasado at 30 million. So I think what I really enjoy about the options of Comparisonator and helping in this particular one instance with this player being able to generate this report and share this with the people that exist, and even down to using me to others in the same metric.
How did they
You can
take
compare
this
him
when
to-
you send the reports to them? What they say? Barcelona.
I think the part that they liked about it was their eyes, scouting eyes, are always the same. They pull data, they pull metrics, but I think what they looked at was they said, if we're able to see where he's comparable, we can eliminate looking at so many games and players and just focus on certain players that we find that are comparable. And again, you're not dealing, this isn't Barca B. This is not dealing with, Deco and the top staff that are pulling into the first team. This is an opportunity for Barca's second team to bring players in that could potentially become first team players, which is what they see in a player like Mbacke. So for this, at the right price, I think the transfer is fantastic for the player. I think he's happy with it. I think the club were happy with it, both of them. I think it probably makes more sense to see what the future holds for the player. But again, once he's into this environment, it's how he performs and how he manages the next season and the season after and the season after that shows the progress of the player. But I think it's interesting to see this, that before he went to Barca B, your AI says he would have been the best center back in the league. And I think there was a lot of argument to say that he was, from just general scouts and general vision, people using vision to watch the games.
So they agreed then?
They agreed. And I think, like I said, for me, this is what makes this a fascinating tool. If I'm looking at players that I work with, and even now I have some players, again, because we're an emerging agency, I'm looking at 17 and 18-year-old players here based in the United States that are playing in MLS academies or moving out of MLS academies and into USL franchises that have the options to move ultimately to Europe. You find that specific clubs in Eredivisie, in the Belgian league, in the Danish league, in the French league, in the Bundesliga, you're finding some of these clubs having very similar matches to players that exist already within those leagues. And I did the same exact thing with another player who we just came to an agreement with that we're going to be moving into a very, very large club in Poland once the window opens in February. But it was the same type of a metric. He's an 18-year-old now, soon to be 18 and a national team player for the United States. And he's going to make the move into to quite a large club that gives him a lot of visibility, but it suits his overall performance. It dubs him as a potential top player in his league. And I think these are moments where when you look at young players, you're looking at options for players to grow. So I use your tool at Comparisonators specifically to identify the best places for the players I work with already. Some people probably use it for all of the features that it has because it's a fantastic tool. And, I can't say enough good things about it because it's all about how you use it. And for me, for what I want to use it for, once I've identified players that I work with, the first thing I want to do is find where's the best place for that player to go. And ultimately, being able to compare data and see the visibility of what works, it's helped me now reach out into those markets and reach out to specific clubs about opportunities to take, a player on a transfer or take a player on a free.
You're also in the women's transfers.
Yes.
And how do you find Comparisonator affecting your business? Is it covering? Because now Comparisonator has also a women's platform, which we believe it's amazing potential. And but what you do as an overall, right? You're actually serving to United States football industry by opening gateways to players like that. You develop, you support, you follow up, you constantly travel. So I have to congratulate you. But what do you think the women's football is going in transfer-wise, the money inside, the comfort in the clubs, club management? How do you see that and where it's actually going?
So I think a place where your tool becomes extremely successful, Tarkan, is in the United States, because of the size of the country, right? We have 3 time zones, excluding Hawaii, which is its own, animal outside of the mainland. But when you look at the amount of players, the amount of opportunity that exists in the U.S., to cover the ground if you were to employ a scout, right? And I have this discussion quite frequently with clubs in Europe. To employ a scout to live in North America, just the costs of travel would surpass any salary that's worth paying to be able to actually go to the events that are necessary to find players. So in reality, one of the beautiful things about scouting is it's become so, digital in the sense that you can pull information, you can watch live games, you can do any of these things. In the women's game, budgets are not the same as the men's. Now, from a dollar perspective of what players are being paid, we've seen substantial jumps in the United States with NWSL players receiving payments that are higher. Now you have the USL Super League on the women's side, which is, a base salary is paying more than majority of clubs in Europe. The NSL in Canada is launching the Northern Super League. Their minimum salary is $55,000. So what you find in the women's context is there's so many more opportunities where on my side of the world for women that I'm actually now taking the second-rate player over to Europe to a degree, because the clubs that used to be able to sign these players in top tiers, unless their dollar values increase, the players are sitting back going, wait a minute. So if I move to Europe, I can play for 2,000 euros a month, but if I stay in the States, I can play for 5,500. So it's a large gap, and what that's doing is it's condensing our market. But what it's also doing is it's creating a layer of fluff. So at the top of the cappuccino, if I can, you've got a nice layer of cream, right? And ultimately, you have a deep root of coffee to the bottom, and there's that nice layer of in between. And I think that's a layer that a lot of people are now starting to look at. The vehicle with your tool is, just this transfer window alone, we've done 9 players in the females game, and every single one of them, -1, 8 of the 9, we were able to generate profiles in Comparisоnator to help push these deals over the line. So for me, I'm finding a massive success with it because all of the games that we have in these states for the college level player, which is the biggest market probably in the world to pull from for amateur talent, has all of the data uploaded into Scout now and into the mechanisms you're pulling from. So for us, it's a big benefit. I'm able to actually take a report, send it to a club, and actually, in fairness, I think I've sent a handful of these clubs to you guys already, because when I send the report, they're like, where did you get this? And I said, well, you can reach out to the company directly. They'll be able to tell you. And I think what those clubs are starting to realize is rather than employing more scouts, it's so much more cost effective for them to be able to utilize the platform to do their own metrics and data. Now, yes, agents can find players however they find them. I tend to just watch my own. That's a preference of mine. I like to scout my own because I come from a first-team football background for years. But, from a club could turn around and use a parameters league or virtual transfer or, even a recruitment shop tool that exists in your platform, and they can go specifically identify what it is they're looking for. Right now I'm helping another club in Portugal. We just signed a Canada senior women's national team player to Sporting Lisbon on the women's side, 18 years old, top talent. But while we were there, was connecting with other clubs, and I was able to use the same tool to help them find 2 players that potentially they will sign for their team. But these 2 players hit nobody's radar in the United States from a scouting mechanism. But when you pull the data and you see where their performances are, now that club has looked at them and said, oh, let's go watch further detail in Scout. Now they've watched the film and they're like, okay, I've watched 10, 12 games of these players. These are good players. How come nobody has picked them up? And that's the beauty of having the talent level that exists. You have so much opportunity that's there. And I kind of feel like, services like yourself, they fall into a niche of a market, like the biggest agencies in the world, they do a fantastic job. They have large client bases. They have very, very deep rooted relationships, and they're transferring the top 1% of players, right? But there's still a threshold of players for agents that work in the same space as me that have an Mbacke or have a Pape Marboy or a Nathan Worth or a Jevon Romero. Like, you have these players that are national team players on the youth side that maybe aren't fitting into certain profiles, but they can turn around and they can go on a loan in Chivas, or they can go into a club like Feyenoord, or they can go to some other club because the price point makes the most sense for the production, And I think this is the nature of it. If I walk into my Bentley in Beverly Hills, I'm gonna pay a lot of money for my Bentley, but at some other part of the world, I can probably.
Eyes are very important. So when I developed the product, the most important thing for me, for example, to stop wasting time. Because imagine, like, I'm now over 55 years old. Imagine how many million kilometers I worked as a scout going to, let's say, Germany, 2 players to watch, agencies come to me, oh, Tarkan, very good players, da 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 da. Okay, 4 days travel, if I can squeeze some more games in it. So I go watch the players, they're unfortunately shit. You know how many millions of times I actually lived this situation? So therefore, we've decided, and thanks and condolences to Christoph Daum, when I was the director of scouting in Bursaspor, we worked together to build profiles, player profiles. So that was the actual beginning of Comparisonators. So
Yeah.
when I think about him, it was a great coach, and hopefully he's in his heavens and watching all the best games. But
Yeah.
anyway, so Eric, I hope to actually host you again. But Mbacke's story, if it becomes a story, you're already a star.
I think at the end of the day, something I like about his situation is
Just tell us a little bit about yourself and the interesting transfer of Mbacke to Barcelona, which is a very interesting story. So we'd like to hear it from first hand.
so my background ending up into the agency space was a bit unique. I spent substantial amount of time in professional football from academy to first team, and always always enjoyed talent, always enjoyed finding talent, exploiting talent, helping players move. And one thing led to the other, Tarkin. I think you just start realizing you have relationships around the world, and actually a couple of players that I knew got me into the space, and a very, very good friend of mine out of France got me into the agency business. But the reality is all of the players that we work with inside of the agency are we take into their first professional contract. So the majority of everybody we deal with is about placing them in the right place to start their career. So mindfully within emerging talent. So all of them, of which I can go through, are players that have started much like Mamadou Mbacke. He started in a boarding program in Montverde, Florida, at the Soccer Institute of Montverde Academy, SEMA, through a partnership in Senegal. And Mamadou, like other players, have come through that system, and have had opportunities to play around the world. They have players playing now in multiple places in Spain and other parts of
Fantastic,
Europe,
mate.
MLS.
Very unique
And
process.
yeah, it's an interesting process, because I think what it's really about is about the individual. This is a very, very important process for some of these young boys that come from these markets, because they're given and provided an education. So if football fails, there's a fallback. They have education. And I think this is what makes this process quite unique for some of these kids, is they have the ability to do both. And I think anybody who understands, that spends a lot of time, or any bit of time in Africa for that degree, sees that as an ultimate opportunity in life, right? It's not just about football. It's about how to be a better person, and how to be a smarter person, and utilize your ability to play a game to give you more avenues in life.
Eric, it was fantastic to host you, and hope to see you again. And best regards to United States. Tell me if you need to say anything.
Targan, it was a pleasure to be hosted by you. I really appreciate you giving me the invitation to share the story of Mbacke, and hopefully we have the opportunity to share many more stories.
Thank you very much.